First of all, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Rick Crawford. I've got a background in archaeology and anthropology. Got a degree from Northern Arizona University. Also, I've been on some archaeological field digs with Southern Utah University, and subsequently just have a very big interest in the Native American things, the history of this country, and a lot of the histories that are not presented by academia and science and everything, and that's some of the things we're going to discuss here today. I know Dan's been involved in historical research for probably most of his life. Tell a little bit about yourself, Dan, your background, other than the times that you were in jail and everything.
Right, there's a lot of that we don't want to talk about. I actually developed an interest in the history a long time ago. I mean, my parents were into a lot of various historical stories that stem from our own family. But it really didn't take off for me until I got involved with the Native American petroglyphs, and I remember my first panel. I was so taken in by it. I just had to find out what it was talking about. And back then we didn't have the internet. We had to spend hours and hours and hours at the various libraries. And there is one particular theory that I chose to follow simply because it made sense to me, and ever since then I've just been very big into the mysteries and what I would say or call the true histories, the untold histories of this nation, and or this continent for that matter. And that's kind of what got me into this and put me here today. And the story that we're going to talk about today and look at the various possibilities was a purported underground city that was found in the Grand Canyon in 1909, April 5th, found by G.E. Kincaid. And we're going to go through various points of this and show some evidences and look at the hypothesis and look at this as a hypothesis to see if it is possible for this to actually exist.
We know that there's a number of underground cities across the world, and so we know that underground cities are nothing new. In Turkey, there's several of these underground cities. There's another one, Petra, that's it's been in the Indiana Jones movie and a lot of different movies. It's very spectacular, carved out of the sandstone with the underground city behind it. I just want to read a little bit here about this Derinkuyu in Turkey. It says it's an ancient multi-level underground city with 13 floors extending to a depth of approximately 85 meters. It was large enough to shelter thousands of people together with their livestock and food stores. It is the largest excavated underground city in Turkey and part of a network of several underground complexes found across Cappadocia. It says it's hard to date this city, but it was first discovered in 1963 when a cave wall was opened to reveal a passageway that was more than 280 feet deep. Just some of the details of it, they could roll a 100-pound stone in front of the door so it couldn't be opened from the outside. 13 stories under the ground with ventilation shafts. It had a well that they could access both in and out of the city, and each floor could be closed off separately in case they were attacked and had to retreat. Had spacious rooms with vaulted ceilings, a religious complex, rooms for sleeping and study. And so these are some of the places that tourists today can go to. But so we know that underground cities are around the world, They're used by modern people. The city of Montreal has a complex underground city, and we know of many caverns, individual caverns and caves and smaller complexes that have been discovered by archaeologists across the globe. This one we're going to talk about right now, according to Kincaid, G.E. Kincaid, was enormous. And we know that while he was on this expedition, supposedly for the Smithsonian Museum, that they came and studied it. We don't know exactly where it is, but Dan's done a lot of research and he's kind of come to an idea of some of the possible locations of this city. We also have several alternative sources of information that allude to or point to the possible existence of an underground city in this area. We know that, just from my perspective as in anthropology, along the Grand Canyon rim and plateaus along the Grand Canyon, there is one of the biggest prehistoric civilizations in America, in North and South America. Studies have been shown that there were over 100,000 people living in that vicinity at one time.
Well, the whole concept of underground cities being possible, I don't think there's any question as far as that goes. But one thing that has always puzzled me is, what difference does it make whether it was in Turkey, whether it was in India, or here? That any time something like that pops up here in the Americas, you know, it's just like, well, this couldn't have happened. It just suddenly becomes an impossibility when it happened on this continent.
Right.
And we want to discuss that also, and you know, the motives of Smithsonian and why a lot of these things seem to be swept under the rug.
Let's talk about what would be the reasons for having an underground city to start with. Why would these different civilizations decide to have an underground city? What's your opinion about that?
Well, they're really cool. I've thought about that a lot. Why would these underground cities exist? And you know, to me, one of the things is for safety. For what reason? It could be war. It could be Holocaust situations. Something drove them underground. The Hopi talk about emerging from under the
underworld,
earth and
right.
the underworld. The legend of the ant people. The Aztec talk about living in these underground cities or caverns for 200, 300 years. I really don't think it was just a hole in the ground that they crawled into and stayed for 300 years. There's more to it.
That's a very good point. In this area in Turkey, the city of Derinkuyu, they surmise that was there to escape from other marauding tribes and raiders, and that they could retreat into this city when they were attacked. I think some of the things that come to my mind, at least we know from modern study, that being underground has an advantage if you're in a harsh desert environment where it's very hot and dry in the summertime and very cold and windy in the wintertime. And so that would be another possible reason for an underground city to exist.
Yeah.
To get away from the elements.
Well, if we touch base on all the evidences that have surfaced over the years, and I've spent a lot of time on this particular topic, not so much because of the article itself, but because of all the other research that just seems to tie in with it concerning the people whom I think was responsible for it. Several other things leads me to this, studying the Aztec. looking into other events that have occurred in the past that ties into this. There's so many evidence, and it's all tied together. And to me, these are the things that give this the credibility. And there's a story to be told here that is just unbelievable, plain and simple.
As Kincaid was going down the Colorado River, in his article, it was in the Gazette, the Reno Gazette. He said that he noticed he was looking for possible mining areas and different interesting formations, just as later, or earlier than that, I believe it was, the John Wesley Powell expedition went down, and they were looking for some of the same things. So it wasn't out of the ordinary that Kincaid, under the direction of the Smithsonian, was in this area. Now we need to mention that G.E. Kincaid, there needs to be some more research done on this particular individual to actually identify and prove that he existed. Because we know that the Smithsonian subsequently, when research has been done to verify this, has denied this information and has claimed that they didn't know a G.E. Kincaid.
Well,
but we know the Smithsonian's done a lot of things in the past that haven't been forthright.
This has already been done. I'm pretty meticulous in my research, and I don't give up so easily, but I found Kincaid, I found S.A. Jordan, and I found their affiliation with Smithsonian.
Okay.
I mean, you have to dig deep enough in order to find what you're looking for. Too many people rely upon the modern works that are written, anywhere from 1900 and forward. And you know what? You gotta find their bibliography, and you gotta find out where they got their information. Go back to the most original source material you can find, and if it exists, you're gonna find it sooner or later. Now, I don't think that we need to go into the details of Kincaid and S.A. Jordan. We know they were out there.
Let me interject one thing in here, Dan.
Okay.
I think that Dan has some sources, and we're not going to reveal any of these names because we don't want them to. We want them to continue to help him in his research. But many university libraries have documents and manuscripts and books that are not available to the general public. And Dan has some contacts that can get access to some of these things and check them out, and we can do research through them. And so this, from my understanding, this is how you've got some verification on some of these individuals.
Some to a small degree. Primarily what you may be referring to is there's a lot of hard to find material out there, and your average researcher, no pat on the back intended, but your average researcher just doesn't put forth the effort that they need to in order to find the answers. And oftentimes you find out that there may be clues in a publication that you can't get your hands on, and I won't stop until I find the publication in one way or another. And that's where you start finding things, is in those old publications. That's why I have the collection of 2,600 PDF books.
Right.
That's my research material, and it just keeps growing and growing.
I guess as we progress here, I guess we could talk about a little bit about when Kincaid found this underground city, or this cave, was quite by accident. One of the things that's come out of this is that he found in this particular cave Egyptian-like artifacts that had hieroglyphics and carved effigies or statues that reminded him of things he had seen in the Egyptian culture, and so there's a lot of the other individuals that have talked about these underground cities or quoted Kincaid have put a big emphasis on the Egyptian culture, but we know that every culture brings influences in, and so possibly there was Egyptian influences here. What do you think about, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, I've mentioned this many times before. I've seen a lot of the reports, and I've seen this same story of the underground city in the Grand Canyon. I've seen it regurgitated so many different times from different points of view, and sometimes they intentionally add photographs that have nothing to do with the site, and I don't know, I'm tired of reading them. But one of the things that they cover here, hang on a second and I'll find it. One of the things that they play heavily upon is this Egyptian, was there an Egyptian colony here in the Americas, and was an Egyptian cave hidden by Smithsonian, was there a cover-up? And well, yeah, there probably was a cover-up, but this all comes from a statement that Kincaid made, wherein he says, or where in the article it says, that this mysterious cavern, hewn in solid rock by human hands, was of Oriental origin, possibly from Egypt. Now, obviously, Kincaid didn't know too much about Oriental origin or Egyptian, because, the two have nothing to do with each other.
Right, there's no known connection.
The reason that I've taken this possibly from Egypt out of the equation is, as you go through the article and you read the description that comes later in, nothing has anything to do with Egyptian. It all has to do with Oriental Buddhism.
Okay.
Or Hinduism.
And so the artifacts and things were, in your opinion, more Buddhist type than Egyptian type?
Everything they've described
Okay.
is absolutely of the Hindu
No,
Buddhist.
no, I'm not familiar with the Hindu religion or the Buddhism stuff. Did they have a hieroglyphic style of writing, or that he refers to, that they saw some type of hieroglyphic writing in the walls of this chamber that may have led him to use the term Egyptian?
Well, what type of writing system these people were using, I personally don't know. That's not necessarily my field, but if you want to see what they could have used and what they may have used back in those days, go look at the Ajanta caves. I don't know that it shows a lot concerning a writing system, but there's an awful lot of murals and so forth, and I actually think that what you see in and out of the caves of Ajanta in India is very much what you would see if you had just walked up onto this underground city today. That's actually a good question on the what type of a writing system would they have been using. To me, it's very much like today's modern Tibetan writing.
Okay. Well, we both have studied, and part of our main passion or interest is the Native American, or what you want to term is I don't know what the term is you prefer. In anthropology or archaeology, you're hearing talk about Anasazi writings or Fremont or whatever, but we know that the natives that were here in North America and South America had their own forms of communication and writing, and part of our passion is preserving and studying this symbolism, left some of the only known information that we have about these people, and to unlock that is probably one of the mysteries of humanity. Be able to unlock that.
And that's part of what got me involved in this. If you go back into the very earliest writings of the Europeans, the known Europeans coming to this land, and the communications that they had with the Indians and the various tribes that they met up with, one thing they knew then is that every tribe, regardless of his language, could communicate with each other. And it was through this hieroglyphic system of writing modeled after hand sign language.
Yep.
They knew it. And when this new generation come along, and in these modern times, it's looked at as cowboy scribbling, only meant for the author to understand, hunting magic. I've heard it all.
Right. We are finding in our studies that there's many links, because just as a quick example, there's a real interesting panel that I found in one area, and as I was doing research, it's a unique panel of a circle of people holding hands in a circle, and it's very unique. It's obviously talking about a family circle or a group, and I've never seen that anywhere else. Well, as I did some subsequent research, I found down in Southern California, I found a panel that had the exact same circle of family hands, and the writings and the story was very similar, and it was almost as if the same author created those things, just because of the symbolism. But there's so much research left here, and we're just scratching the surface. But as we get back to the topic of the underground city, Dan has found locations where you believe that the writings on the panels are referring to specific locations that are underground, and in a couple of cases to actual cities.
Yes, there is one place that we call the Map Rock, and and I know that sounds a little corny, but the symbolism is there, and many would view it as conjecture, and frankly, I don't blame them, and I really don't care. I don't do this for their benefit. But there is a place that we call the Map Rock, and I'll likely show a photo of it in this. But it actually shows 3 of the locations of underground cities, and strangely enough, one of them, now you might wonder how is this considered a map rock, and how do you look at it in a geographical manner, and that would take a long time to explain.
You might mention though that the natives often used incorporation.
Yeah, it's called rock incorporation.
Rock incorporation, where they use features of the rock to show locations
Right.
on their map.
I mean, how many times have you walked up to a petroglyph panel and you've got this perfectly smooth surface here, and nobody wrote on it?
Yeah.
And over here, where it's rough and has ridges and things that look like hills and mountains, or gorges for that matter, and that's where they did all the writing. Yeah.
Right. Why did the pioneers call every mound they came by Molly's nipple? It's rock incorporation. No, that's a little humor, but anyway. So the natives themselves often used rock incorporation into their, and I've seen this myself in a lot of the panels that seem to be maps.
Right.
And so that kind of gives us a general idea of where this possibly could be.
Well, the reason that we find this particular panel of interest is, long before I actually went and seen the panel, I had a Navajo take me there, and I had a friend of mine who was an archaeologist that told me about this map rock that existed in that area, and I hadn't put 2 and 2 together for quite some time. A Navajo friend of ours took us and showed us the panel, and it was in such bad shape. It was pathetic, and I realized at that time that I needed to take steps in order to preserve the information that was on this, and it took us days in order to document everything that was on that meticulously, capturing every angle, anything and everything that we knew was actual Native American petroglyph, and overlooking all the graffiti, and I mean, it was unbelievable, the condition it was in. But it took me almost 11 years to be able to recreate this panel digitally so that we could actually see what it might be talking about. And the story that I believe it tells is referring to a people fleeing before their enemy. And they passed by 3 of these ancient underground cities, according to what I get from it.
Mm-hmm. And that may have been why one of these underground cities was constructed in the first place, was a people fleeing from a enemy, or a group of people that was seeking their destruction.
And that's possible, but I would suspect it goes much further back than the actual creation date of this particular panel.
So, right. But the fact that they were aware of these cities at that time is a significant discovery, or a significant evidence pointing towards the existence of these.
Well, the interesting thing is you know that you find that in the Aztec record. I mean, there's no question that they believe, at least, that they came from these underground cities. Okay?
Well, you know, you've heard of the Father Crespi collection.
Yeah.
And the father from down in Ecuador, who had this spectacular collection of artifacts that was given to him by the natives as he performed weddings and burials and stuff. And they always, when he asked them, where did you get these things? They always told him from the underground cities in that region, which would have been the Amazon, or we know from today that there is an underground city beneath much of the area in Ecuador. People, scientists and archaeologists have been in those cities. But
that's interesting. I haven't heard that.
So in the Father Crespi story, he talks about underground city, and so if these people came from down in South America, were fleeing, they had a knowledge. They would have had a knowledge of underground cities, and so we're just trying to give things that lead credence to this potential existence of this underground city that Kincaid.
Right. And you know, and all you got to do is look at the various old Latin maps. There's so many clues upon those maps, and that it's very clear that those maps were not drawn after they came here, after they left here. These are the maps they were following to find what they believed to be here.
So they had a destination in mind when they came.
Yeah, because the cartographer didn't go back and say, you know what, crap, we never found it. But hey, let's go ahead and draw this lake on here. Let's go ahead and give it a name, you know, septum, cities, and what's the other word? We will get to it.
Septimania? Well,
Yeah, septum is the word they used,
Right.
and then there's cities, 7 cities. And it's all in Latin, okay?
Right.
These were Spanish, not Latin.
some
I
of
know
the
they're related.
some of the other problems that we face in finding some of these areas is there's been a lot of geological things that have happened, earthquakes, volcanoes. There's a lot of volcanic activity in some of these areas, and then just Mother Time.
Right. But, you know, the point I was getting at is the cartographer didn't go back home and say, well, you know what, we never found that lake, but let's go ahead and draw a lake here. And let's go ahead and put a city here and a city here, and put these 7 cities, and let's not give them a name.
Right.
Let's just say 7 cities in Latin, and patria, patrimony, inheritance. Why make this stuff up? If you never seen it, you never found it, why would you put it on a map based upon modern day expeditions? These are the maps that they were using to find it.
In
They
other
were
words,
created long before they came here.
right. In other words, there was a reason
They had a
that they
purpose.
came here. It wasn't just a blind, oh, we think there's something here, so we're going to go wander off and through this rough country. They had a destination, and they had evidence. We know they had evidence of the destination in mind from some of the things that Cortez and Pizarro and all those ruthless Spanish and the conquistadors, they tortured and killed people for information that they gained to try to find some of these places.
Right, and see, and it wasn't just one cartographer, there were several. I mean, why would all of them draw basically the same shape? I mean, all you gotta do is look at the various maps and you'll see the similarities in the outlines of this lake that they called Lake Kapala. Okay, this is what they were looking for, and the 7 cities that were around it. Now, when the Spanish came up here on their expeditions, nobody ever found it. Why? Why didn't they find it?
So are you alluding, do you think that this possible that this underground city was this linked to Montezuma, or possibly the city of Montezuma, the Spanish were looking for?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
I believe they knew about it. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the Aztec themselves, there was actually 7 tribes, the Aztec was one of them. 6 of the tribes stayed in their own caves for about 200 years. The Aztec, according to the record, they stayed in their cave for at least 300 years. So by the time they got down to Mexico, it was well established by the previous tribes.
Okay, I'm here with Dan Lowe, and we're talking about underground cities, about an article that was written in the Phoenix Gazette by G.E. Kincaid in 1909, and some of the subsequent evidences that give shed light on this, potential evidences that show that it actually existed. I mentioned earlier that the archaeological, anthropological record shows that there was a large group of people living along the high Colorado River plateaus, probably one of the largest civilizations in central North America, Western America, and through our research, it was kind of a combination of our efforts. I was looking on Google Earth one day and noticed this unusual land formation and consulted with Dan, and we came to the conclusion that this was actually an agricultural area where canals and ditches were made for corn or wheat to be grown for a large group of people. And Dan measured the area and concluded that it was, what we can see is visible, is about 300 acres. Which also leads credence to an experience that Dan had years before I met him that ties into this underground city potential information.
Well, yeah, this is, first off, we're going to try and talk about some of the things that, some of the source material that gives credence to this particular underground city and others that are suspect of being in the northern Arizona, southern Utah areas.
And let me put in here that one of the strong evidences is that all these things are in one basic geographical location.
Yeah.
And so that in and of itself is a pretty strong circumstantial evidence.
Right. And when I first read the story about the underground city, it to me it was believable, okay? But it doesn't become a part of my belief system until I've applied my scrutiny to it. And if it were not for some of the previous research that I had done, I probably wouldn't have taken as much notice that I did at that time. Some of the sources are private stories that have surfaced over the years. Documents that were written before the cave was even found. The legends of the Aztecs, the legends of the local tribes, the Hopi, previously called, I believe it was Yukwai, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But one that I thought was pretty curious that got me back on this particular story that come out of the Phoenix Gazette was, I don't want to give too much detail on it because it is an active project that I'm still working on.
With the Napa
Yeah.
project.
There was an individual who came up from Mexico back in probably the 70s who came with an original document that was drafted up by, I believe it was his great-grandfather. And he spent at least 15 years in the general area looking for the things that were mentioned in this document. And the document itself was a rewrite of an older document that apparently became in such bad condition that it had to be rewritten. And he was talking about his ancestor. And based on what I read, this would have been back in the early days of the Spanish coming here. And this particular individual was a Mexican Indian who, what I gather from the story, was catering to the Spanish as they came through there. And he apparently had his own little private cache. But in these documents, he talks about this enormous cave with amounts unknown to any man.
Of treasure, or what they considered to be treasure.
And at one point, I believe he mentions riches and things such as that. And this really caught my attention because it was associated with the whole story and with this man's personal cache site. In his personal cache that was mentioned in this document, it refers to a small ebony box, and that this box, amongst other things, had a piece of parchment paper written in mule's blood in a language that he did not understand. But he said that it told of this enormous cave and that it was in that particular area. And this just happened to be one of the areas where I had suspected, due to this previously mentioned map rock that I told you about, as to where I believed it to be. And this has been a project of probably close to 15 years now, and it wasn't that many years ago when you called me up and asked me to go take a look at that, and that's when we saw somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 acres of irrigation systems.
And previous to that too, let me mention that the clues in this document that you got a hold of led us to an area that you miraculously, in my view, but nevertheless were able to find various features that were on that map that the people that came up from Mexico could not or did not find.
Right.
And that subsequently you've tried to get in contact with these individuals, but we've never been able to figure out where they are or locate this particular individual.
Right. And the way I came by the document is after this man had spent probably 15 years looking for it in a particular area, and this is part of the verbal part of the story that came with it. Apparently he didn't find anything, and so he sought the help of a friend of mine who
has written a number of books. Let's put that in there.
From time to time he would look for these things. He didn't devote any specific time to it, but he had other interests in the area and kind of kept a lookout for various clues that were described in the document. After he spent about 15 years with that in his possession, he passed it along to me, and it wasn't my first trip down there that we discovered one of the primary clues. I mean, I don't know how anybody ever missed it.
Well, I think that the primary clue is obvious, but nobody knows what it means. It's just
Yeah, there's always that factor, you know. We've got an old Spanish document that's
Written in Spanish, and Old Spanish,
It's
not
written
in
in the Old
not in
Spanish.
modern Spanish, so it's hard to interpret.
right, and not to mention the document was, you know, in pretty poor condition, but we have managed to get a transcription of it, and it's probably about 99%
Accurate.
transcribed into the original Spanish that was on it. A few words that we just can't get because it's in such bad condition. We have had that translated, and from several different perspectives. So you're always going to get a different perspective too. I mean, you know, one example was the corral that was mentioned in it,
And the location.
how you position yourself in the corral,
Right.
which way you're supposed to.
And you later found through the Old Spanish that it was the complete opposite of what you initially thought that it was,
True, and
just by missing a word or two.
well,
Misunderstanding.
it comes down to perspective.
Right.
And I took this particular phrase to several different people and explained to them what the initial person who pointed it out to me had said, and they themselves agreed that it can be translated either way.
Either way. So there's a little ambiguity there that.
And you're always going to find that. And that's why you want to try and, before you go after things such as this, you got to try and get the best and most correct information you can.
Right.
I have better things to do than chase possibilities.
Right.
I need the good, cold, hard, straightforward
Evidence, yeah.
information.
Yeah. So basically, on this document, it tells about this individual who had a small treasure that he had left for his ancestor. His ancestor came up from Mexico to recover the treasure. They couldn't find some of the locations. You got the information. We were able to find some of the information in there, but we haven't been able to get to the final destination because of various translation problems and possibly changes in the topography from weather or volcanic activity or something like that. But that document gives credence to a large cavern in the area of a people from long ago that contained a treasure of unknown proportions or amounts. But treasure to them may be different than us, because I know, for instance, like to the ancient Aztecs, feathers were very, were trade items of very highly esteemed. Things like jade and feathers and shells and yet gold and silver also were, and copper were also part of their valuable things that they had value in. But I think that one of the things both you and I are very interested in, and that could very well be contained in this, is actual records of these peoples.
Right.
And that is probably the most intriguing part.
See, and what I find interesting about this is the way the evidence has come. Even though it doesn't necessarily, well, it can give evidence to these underground caverns, but 75 years before this document that we just talked about came forward, another incident happened in the exact same area, wherein a man was taken by two Paiutes to a cave with his brother, an enormous cave that contained untold amounts of riches. And it just happened to be in the exact same area.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me that gave credibility to the story that came in 1975.
I think too, some of the federal government's own actions and things, I don't think that anybody's ever found this particular cave we're talking about. I think they found the city that Kincaid refers to, and this may be an offshoot of that or an unexplored area of it, or totally unrelated, but still gives credence to the fact that there are underground caverns, cities, structures that they use for different purposes in that same geographical area. and you have all these evidences talking about perhaps different things, but they're all talking to and about underground cities or chambers. So very fascinating. Many sources, some of them not as credible as other sources too, talk about other issues that somebody that does a lot of research could find.
Right, and and one of the things you have to take into consideration, no matter what story comes your way, it has to be studied. You have to apply common sense. I don't care how ridiculous it sounds. I don't care how credible it sounds. It can be one way or the other.
Right.
And so you have to approach it with an agenda to prove or disprove.
Right. One of the things that we talked about earlier that seemed very interesting, and we both came to the same conclusion independently of each other, and then when we talked about it, we both had the same idea, was when John Wesley Powell was going down the Colorado River with his expedition, there were members of his expedition that left the group at one point over some disagreements. And I've always found it very interesting that the area where they left from that expedition could very easily have been as a result of this same area that we're talking about.
The area that they left the expedition is exactly the area that we just got done talking about, that had the 300 acres of
Right.
irrigation canals and so forth.
Right.
And where I have been looking for this cave.
So that in and of itself is a very interesting, there's all these things happening in this one area that seem to be connected in some way.
Right, and those men that left the expedition for whatever reason, and there's controversy on that as well, but those men were killed by Paiutes.
Yep.
And on one hand, according to Powell's record, they basically quit the expedition. They just had enough and they wanted to leave. But there is reason to believe that they were ordered to go and find help, or
Right.
they were caused to leave the expedition.
And we know that actual Jacob Hamlin, some of the Mormon pioneers and groups, Jacob Hamlin was a Mormon missionary to the Indians who spoke many languages and dialects. He was called in with a group of other men who were prepared to make peace between the Indians and the Powell expedition, and yet, as you mentioned, these men were killed, and so there was a lot of the Indians were not happy that the Powell expedition and others were in that area. It was like
Exactly.
a sacred area to them, and they were very upset about it, and they needed to have a peaceful resolution before that would spread to the outlying settlements.
Exactly, and the details of that sacredness and why it was sacred was, I believe, iterated in the story that I explained, where the two Indians had taken two brothers to this cave.
Mm-hmm.
And it, ever since this particular tribe witnessed an unusual tribe in the past, adorned with feathers, came up from the south and carrying with them sacred items.
Mm-hmm.
They, according to this particular tribe, they came and deposited those things in the sacred caverns that they had, and those who stayed and ended up merging with the local tribe, they were made to believe that it was their responsibility to keep these caves, these cavern locations, from anyone else.
Secret and protected. And
Yeah, and I wish I'd read them more sooner than now, because that's actually a pretty good point.
so as we sit here and talk about things, something else came to your mind about a more recent information that's come forth and pertaining to this general area as well from another record.
Yeah, the more recent information, but its source is probably the most ancient. And it comes from Chinese records. And there's actually several incidences that are mentioned within the record that was made. I can't remember the guy's name, but this is, you know, back in 250 AD when he made a record of it. And anybody can look it up. It's called Fusang.
Fusang?
Fusang. And which was a reference to the land itself. And in this record, it describes a canyon of enormous proportion. They go into great detail about the people that they encountered. This expedition had in the ballpark of 20,000 men that came with them, and they described the things they saw and so forth, and the people who were there, and their civilized state of living. And they talk about the people living in the cliffs of these canyons, in enormous caves. And the document that I read refers to an even earlier time, as far back as I believe it was 200 BC, expeditions from China. It's an incredible document, but to me it also gives credence to these underground cities.
That's one of the fascinating things that we're finding as we do archaeological explorations. You know, we had for years the Dead Sea Scrolls, and more of those have come out, and a lot of the information in there is not being made public. Right. Because they're finding things in those documents and those records that show that the people traveled great distances prior to Columbus, and we know the Vikings and all these explorers, that there were groups of people that predated those trips that were taking ships and boats and traveling to all quarters of the world. And that's part of the, in my view, the cover-up that the Smithsonian and all these other institutes, that the information doesn't fit their narrative, and so they're not making that information public.
Well, that kind of problem's been going on for a long time.
Sure.
And I mean, this is why the Imperial Library of Constantinople was under attack so many different times and eventually burned.
Yeah.
They tell us that a majority of the books that were in that library were lost. I would tend to believe that they have been salvaged, or at least many of them. And this is where a lot of this old information was kept.
The Library of Alexandria,
yes, that one
is another one that was destroyed.
Except the Egyptians never went anywhere.
But you know, we can delve into this even deeper. We could talk about the Brewer's Cave or some of these other places where records have been found in caverns, in caves, in other areas besides this area that we're talking about, that once again lend credence to the fact that there were peoples that deposited records and treasure and lived during certain periods of time underground, whether it was to escape from enemies or for whatever reason, protection from the elements. But there are many, many evidences and examples of this that we're finding more and more all the time. And a lot of it's not common knowledge because mainstream media and the narrative of Native Americans and even religious groups aren't being forthright with it because it doesn't fit. It goes against some of their teachings and their
right. And then you've got the you know, the overzealous researcher who would which is why I pointed out the thing about the Egyptians. This is not of Egyptian origin. Is you have your lazy researcher, if you will, who picks up one little word like Egyptian that was mentioned in the document, and well, you've seen what's happened. Now you've got articles left and right on the internet. Did, Smithsonian cover up an Egyptian colony, and that kind of thing. And great, now I forgot where the hell I was going with this, so screw that word.
Well, we know. We know.
I know what it was.
Okay.
But it's like the story of Montezuma. I mean, you talk to any treasure hunter, and he's probably heard the story of Montezuma and how Montezuma ordered his people to haul tons of gold and silver back to the home of their ancient ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
These people need to go read the actual Aztec record.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where that story came about, I have no idea. There was an incident that took place with Montezuma I, wherein he sent his priests back to the home of their ancient ancestors, and with them he sent gifts to take to the mother of their Aztec war god, which is a story all in itself. But this happened long before Montezuma II.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a likelihood that this could be the source of the story where the local tribes around the Grand Canyon talk about a people that came bringing certain items with them.
Well, we talked about too, Dan, that the thing that really pissed off.
Did you really just say that?
Yeah,
Pissed off?
the Aztec leader of I can't. What was his name?
Monty.
Well, who was the one that? Well, they were pillaging all their gold and the silver. Well, and they didn't really care about that. But what made them mad was when they were taking their sacred effigies and their records and melting them down.
Right. One of the things that the Aztec record makes clear, and when I say Aztec record, I'm referring to one of the three. There's one by Tezozomoc, who was actually the grandson of Montezuma.
Right.
Then you got Diego Duran, which I think is a pretty credible source. It reads very much like Tezozomoc's record.
And that's the name I was trying to come up with.
Yeah, and these were written in the late 1400s, if I recall. Could have been 1500s. And then, of course, you got Valletta, and portions of it's been translated. But I think it was a little agenda-driven.
Right.
But still a good record to read. And where were we going with
We're talking about the sacred things that they were taking. They didn't care as much that they took their gold and silver as their sacred items.
In that record, they made it clear as to what happened to the treasure, and very clear that the treasure that Montezuma had did not come from the north. It was acquired there, and so there was no reason to take it back because it didn't come from here, and it was actually cast into one of the many ponds that's down there.
Right, and that's common knowledge.
They wouldn't tell them which one.
Yeah. In fact, if you ask the natives down there today what happened to Montezuma's treasures, they say it got buried in the lake.
Yeah.
That's what they say. They threw it in the lake.
And, I think this is where these legends are born, is people that just don't read.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think that there was a time, or was there a time where they took some of the sacred things that they didn't want the Spanish to get their hands on them and hid them, took them back to these potential cities?
I believe that this may be one of the sources for the stories of tons of gold. This is one thing that the Aztec held sacred, was their written record, their genealogy.
Right.
I don't care how backward these people were and how savage they may have appeared. They were a highly religious people who lived according to what they believed, be it wrong or right, who knows. But they knew the importance of keeping track of their history and their genealogy. And when they saw the Spanish destroying these documents, that just freaked them right out. If there's anything they took back to where it came from, it would have been their written records.
Right.
So that's a possibility.
What about, do you think there's anything that ties this particular story we're talking about, the underground city and the Grand Canyon, to some of the things they found around Kanab, for instance, where the pioneers found the cave in the White Rocks that they was made with, by man-made, and they've pioneers found it and they've gone back in there, and or the Three Lakes with the water traps that they've never been able to get to the end of.
Okay, let's address them one at a time. The caves that were found supposedly back in the Freddy Crystal days, just my personal opinion, but I don't believe there's anything to it.
Okay.
Now,
Do you think those caves were man-made?
did Freddy Crystal actually have a map or a document that? Well, yeah, it's quite possibly did. Was it Montezuma's treasure? No, there isn't a Montezuma's treasure in Arizona or Utah. At least not one that belonged to him personally.
Mm-hmm.
There were vast treasures that were left long before, hundreds and maybe even 1,000 years prior to Montezuma.
Mm-hmm.
The Three Lakes site, I know that the majority of this came from Brant Child's own ideas of what he believed was there, but what I find interesting is that in the things that he found, he was actually, in my estimation, pretty accurate,
Mm-hmm.
but not for the reasons everyone else would think.
Right.
For example, the hieroglyph, not symbol, hieroglyph that was found above the supposed cave in the lake says there's a cave below.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? On the map rock that we have talked about previously, it actually shows the Three Lakes site.
Right.
And it's actually quite clear, even to those who might not be able to understand what the glyphs are saying.
Yeah, anything else, and so that really gives, because you can see that the Three Lakes feature, that actually gives a lot of evidence towards that underground city, because you can see in relation to where that is, where the other things on the map are.
Well,
That's like a key, in my
the thing
opinion.
that I thought was interesting was around the third lake on this map rock is where all the activity was. And two symbols, two hieroglyphs that carry the meaning of broad movement, or if you want to get more defined and find the correct derivative word, entrance.
Right, and we see the circular shapes that mean, go up or go down.
Ascend or descend,
Yeah,
the spirals.
yes.
There's too many little coincidences there. So if this came out of Brant Child's head, then he was pretty lucky.
Yeah, well, we know that in the many attempts for individuals to get into the Three Lakes caverns, that every attempt has been met with failure, whether it be the scary experiences the scuba divers had, or the attempts to drill in and to tunnel in, or in the very end they were going to drain the lakes, and they found that amber snail, an endangered species, and the Bureau of Reclamation, the EPA, and the BLM shut them down.
Right, and these all sound like excuses, and they sound like stories created by, people that write books. But
for those of us that live in the area,
there's actually a factual basis
right.
to the things that you said.
Yeah, I've lived in that area my entire life, and I've seen the articles out of the paper. I saw the stop order that they were given to abandon their attempt to drain the lakes. In fact, the BLM was so adamant about it that somebody, probably the landowner in my estimation, put a gaggle, a group of geese on there out of spite, because geese love snails, and the BLM went in and caught them all and were making them they were pumping their stomachs and trying to see if there were any live snails still in there. I mean, you can't get any crazier than that, but then that actually happened. And so basically there's either some higher power that's preventing the exploitation of this, or it's just a bunch of coincidental occurrences in that particular instance.
Right, and there's so many different aspects of research that tie together, that give one thing a credibility, and then that gives credibility to another portion, which eventually will bring you back to these underground cities. And you know, and one of those, and we should do a segment on this one day, is what I have come to call the
Key glyphs.
Aztec navigational
Right.
hieroglyph, formerly known as the key glyph, and a man by the name of Bob Ford calls them water glyphs.
Yep, that is a very good, you know, and that gives credence to this underground city too, because it's all a locational thing.
Well, there just happens to be one across the canyon from it, and if I ever get there and I navigate it correctly, I'm pretty sure it's going to point right at the cave.
And it's possible that all these key glyphs, that's what they're bringing you to. I don't know.
I believe that is one trail. I think there are several trails. One will take you up Johnson's Canyon.
Right.
Is there an underground city up there? I don't know.
A lot of petroglyphs all around that country.
Yeah. Another trail will take you over to the area of Colorado City, which to me is one of the most important areas. I won't go into why. There's a trail obviously coming up the Santa Clara River, the Rio Grande, and I think one of the earliest mentioned incidences navigating one of these hieroglyphs is 40 miles north of Mexico City. So I think
Isn't
these
that
glyphs,
the starting point?
yeah, and I believe these glyphs were used to navigate back and forth. And now we're way off.
Right, but
We oughta-
you got a message there. We'll take a break so that we can actually make this do something. Okay. Well, we've been talking a lot about the underground cities, and we've got off on a few tangents because there's so many things that tie back into this. But we're going to continue this series. We're going to bring in some other things and then branch out and show how, in reality, all history does tie back together. This Napa research group that we're putting together, and Dan's been working on for years, is going to, we're raising funds for projects, for research, for preservation, for photographic documentation, for video documentation, to bring public awareness to this subject, so that it's like Dan mentioned on that map rock, all the research that you did and put together and recreating photographically first and then digitally later has given more and more projects and evidence to the underground city, not only the underground city, but a lot of your other research, the key glyphs, other petroglyph sites. And so we'd encourage you to donate to Napa, to this preservation group, and also you can purchase Dan's books that he's written, The Treasures of Utah. What are some of the other things that you have that people can purchase and do some of their own research?
Well, there's the 3 books that were written for research purposes. I never really had an intention of
Right.
putting them out there for the general public, but I don't mind that. And so there's those 3 books. They're only available at this time in PDF format. There has been a printing, but we will have another printing eventually. There's also the 2,600 PDF books and articles that I've made available to a serious researcher, people who like to read. There is also the historic map collection. There's actually two of those. There's one that's the first original USGS topographical maps, and it is organized by state.
And a lot of information on those maps that you don't find or has been taken off these newer maps.
Yes, it's important to know that these did not come from the USGS download website, where honestly you can get any one of these maps if you've got the time and patience to find them. Go for it. These have already been downloaded and they're already in folders and ready to go. Same thing with the PDF books. These books are readily available on the internet, and if you know where to find them, you can go download them absolutely for free. You are not paying for these collections per se. You're paying for the time and the effort in which I've taken all these
years of research and organization.
There are some other things, but I'm very selective on who
Right.
I would.
But your newest, your latest book, The Treasures of Utah, that's available in PDF.
Yes.
And we're going to put a link below on this YouTube podcast here that will tell you how you can donate to Napa. A link to the website toscoro.com,
Yes.
which is Dan's personal website. And we'll put the links down below so that you can see some of the things that we have available for researchers, and as we go through this series, you'll be able to do your own research and find the sources that we're using in our own presentations.
Right.
So you can verify that yourself, not just listen to us and yabba jabba doing over here. So that it'll give credence and credibility to what we're saying. Credibility.
Yeah, there is a basis to everything we've talked about here. These are not things we've just pulled out of thin air. There is a foundation to it. But as I've always said to everybody and anybody who is beginning to or embarking upon a journey of research, is you question all things. Find the most original source, make up your own mind, do it in your way, and have fun doing it.
One other thing I want to put a plug in here for is starting this summer, we're doing trips to, as we go out and do our research, we're going into the field, we're camping out, we're getting together in groups. It's a lot of fun. We hang out around a campfire, we tell stories. We use the tools, the technological tools that we have, whether it be metal detectors or aerial infrared or drones or whatever we're using in our research, and it's a good time and it's a reasonable expense for this trip, and it supports a good cause. It supports this research and it gets you involved personally in what we're doing, and you can contact either me or Dan from the link below, and we can give you further details about those trips that are going to be going on through the summer. So,
Right.
while Dan's texting, are you texting? Or are you going
Not
to talk?
Texting.
Okay. Well, I don't want to talk if you're going to. But I'm just going to give the folks here a little tidbit of information to think about.
Okay.
Why did Mel Fisher, the finder of the Etosha, the vast Spanish treasure that came out of the Gulf of Florida, why did he show up a few years later in Utah and hire a friend of ours, as well as other individuals, and make an expedition into Utah
To 3 specific areas.
to 3 specific areas? And what was the purpose of that expedition? I'll give you a little clue. It might have to do with where the treasure on the Etosha came from. That's going to be the discussion of another topic. That's could be a month-long discussion with many tentacles.
Yes, yes, many testicles.
Okay.
Archie Bunker wasn't available, so we had to get
Okay.
here.
All right. Anything else? I'm underground cities. Why the underground cities? Kincaid. Oh, the medicine wheel. Let's talk about the structure of what Kincaid found in the underground cities and how that may pertain to.
Well, there's much to be said on this subject, but to keep it short, and I think the medicine wheel falls into this and comes from the actual origins of what we're going to mention. You know, Kincaid talked about, if I had it pulled up in front of me, he talked about the passageways and how they fanned out like the spokes of a wheel, and there's something more to this, and this would tie into what's called, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Wheel of Dharma of the Hindu Buddhist religion, and the meanings behind it and so forth. And I think you're going to find out that the medicine wheels, in certain cases, not all of them, in certain cases where they have the spokes and so forth, they come from the same source.
Right. So it's a spiritual or religious connotation in the help me out here, the Lady of Elch.
No, you're on your own.
Okay, the Lady of Elch, the Dharma,
Dharma, if I'm saying it right.
the medicine wheel, and perhaps the description of the underground city with the main hub, the spokes of the wheel, the circular shape of this giant underground city chambers. That's, we think, has the religious connotation to tie all this stuff together, and that's part of the theory we're
Right.
working on.
And interestingly enough, if you look into the Aztec religion, or what the academic world believes about the Aztec religion, you're going to find an awful lot of similarities between it and the religion of Hinduism, Buddhism.
Your new book, The Forbidden Histories of Americas, shows many quality photos, and we'll probably post some of these on this, of the comparison between the Wheel of Dharma and the traditional Navajo paintings, the sand paintings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole spectrum of their religion, their sacred ceremonies and religion points to this same
Well,
structure.
The short of that is there's only two cultures on this planet who have ever used sand paintings in the form of a mandala or Wheel of Dharma design for the purpose of healing. And that is the people of India, Tibetan Hinduism, and the Navajo, Apache, Zuni, and some tribe in Southern California that I can't remember their name. And the similarities between the two is uncanny. It's uncanny.
Absolutely.
Symbolism involved, feathers versus the petals of the lily and so forth. They actually have the same meaning and same appearance.
Right.
And there's something else I want to point out here, but I'm going to have to find it.
Okay, well let me
read it.
point out something else that gives a lot of credibility.
You already are.
A lot of credibility to the Kincaid, the G.E. Kincaid story. Here, he independently, without Dan Lowe's research, tells of a giant Buddha statue with the lotus flower
All by himself.
all by himself, back in 1909. He just pulled that out of thin air if this is a hoax. If he literally saw this, it ties into your research of this very topic, the lotus flower. Over and over again, we're seeing that symbolism in this Native American paint, artwork, culture, religion.
He was a time traveler.
So, once again, that it's coming full circle here about the
I love it.
things that he found in that underground city.
I love it when modern day research comes up with something that fits what somebody said back in the past, only to find out that that thing that you found in modern research actually stems from a period prior to their discovery,
Well, here's what's interesting.
such as Fusang.
Fusang. Well, here's what's really fascinating to me is that it wasn't until the advent of the internet that you were even aware of the G.E. Kincaid story, right?
That's true, I've never heard
Okay,
it before.
and so all your independent research and study done previous to this had come to this conclusion and had this evidence independently of, it wasn't like you read the G.E. Kincaid story and then started doing research about it. You'd already had this basis, this vast amount of research that collaborated with the G.E. Kincaid story of an underground city.
Yeah, and then what I'm trying to pull up right now is something that I don't think this has been available to the English-speaking people for that long, and I just found this within the last month.
One of the things that we're talking about are the underground cities. That's a topic of discussion here today. And we know, or it's accepted, with the creation of an underground city, you're dealing most likely with an advanced civilization. I don't think there's any question that the civilization that builds an underground city, they're not going to carve that city from solid rock with prehistoric stone implements.
No.
I would think that they would be using advanced technology, metal tools.
Well, one of the things that you'll notice in any of the underground cities that have been discovered, whether on this continent or somewhere else, is that they're always found in a formation that's relatively easy to
dig,
carve
to
out.
manipulate, right?
Yeah, which is the case in Kincaid's cave.
Right, sandstone basically, or
Yeah.
volcanic and sandstone. And that's the same as the other underground cities, the ancient ones. In Turkey, it was in a soft volcanic stone. But still, I would say that you know, you're not going to be using stone implements to carve out stone most of the time. I would assume that most of these civilizations, anytime we find evidence of a civilization with an underground city, that it shows evidence of steel, or not necessarily steel, but iron tools,
Right.
copper,
Hardened copper.
hardened copper.
Yeah.
And I think, as in the case of this Kincaid, that he mentions in his newspaper article from the Phoenix Gazette in 1909 that there were tools of that nature inside this cave.
Yeah. And specifically mentioned in one case hardened copper,
Right.
which I believe is a technology that they still don't know how they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll show pictures of these things, you know, the
Right.
chisels and things that have been found over
Right.
the years.
One of the things that Dan has worked on for many years is he has come into possession of a lot of different maps over the years pertaining to ancient civilizations here in America. And he has put these through finding maps where they overlap and fit together. He has developed a master map that I'm going to let him explain to you what he has done and how he's done it.
Well, okay, after X amount of years of accumulating information from various sources, and there are certain people out there I owe a great deal of gratitude for sharing their information. And but what I began to notice, and this is largely the Spanish explorations pertaining to them, we started noticing that a lot of these maps seemed to fit together. And it was actually Dale Bascom and I And I asked Dale, you know, this map obviously fits next to this map, and this map fits next to this map, and we realized that these maps were more than likely being copied from what we call the master map. And there's supposedly only 5 of these maps in existence. Well, being as meticulous as I can be, I want as accurate information as I can possibly get. And so I put together a collection of maps that have shown up over the years, some of which have been published, others have not. And we began, or I began, what is called the Master Map Project. And my vision was to recreate this master map that seems to be quite elusive. The only one we really know of is the one that's up in the church archives, supposedly. The hardest part was authenticating the maps. I mean, you know, you have to put them through a certain amount of scrutiny to find out where they come from, what's the story behind it, is it valid, does it have the earmarks of authenticity. But anyway, in the end, we ended up putting together, or I ended up putting together, a master map project, if you will, and then we turned around and gave it a digital 30-minute map base, brought everything into perspective, proper perspective, because quite frankly, Spanish didn't have helicopters, they didn't have Google Earth, and even though some of them are actually pretty accurate maps, they're just not in proper perspective. I created a 30-minute map base and brought all of this into perspective, and now what we have is a 30-minute map base master map. And being meticulous, I had to turn that into an overlay for Google Earth. And I don't even think you have seen the end results,
I
because
saw the preliminary, but not the finished product.
it makes for one heck of a research tool. So imagine opening up Google Earth and just one little click, and now you have 80 mine sites located.
These are historic Spanish mine sites from old Spanish maps and documents.
And features,
Terrain
that
features, topography.
match up beautifully, the ridges, the drainages, and there's several cache sites and other things that are on this particular
missions.
map.
Show
Overall
some
map, yeah, mission
show
sites.
some missions.
So it just makes a heck of a research tool. But bottom line is, I actually sell a printed version of this. It's about 20 inches by 52, and it's what I call the leather edition. It is an artificial map, okay, but it is created using authentic maps.
Right.
And if anybody's going to take information from that map and go out on an expedition, then you might want to refer to the original maps that it was created from, so that you can get your own perspective in it. There would be, in the versions that are sold and printed, there would be certain things withheld, but it's because of personal interest of
Or Native American interests.
I tried to avoid anything that
Right.
falls on Indian land.
Right.
There's, quite frankly, there's enough off of Indian land. No one needs to be going on someone else's.
Creating a problem there.
Exactly, and I will.
Respect their religion and
I
their.
won't be a part of promoting people sneaking onto Indian land.
One thing we ought to mention here is that the Native American tribes, the Navajo, the Hopi, the Paiute, the Utes, all these tribes, there's a certain amount of sensitivity that they have towards a lot of the topics that we're talking about. And so it's really important that if you're researching these things or you're going into some of these areas, that you respect their opinions, their lands, their boundaries.
Even if you're not
Even if you're not on their
land.
land, and you run into some of these people, and don't get in a confrontation with them. Be very polite and respectful of what they represent, because in most cases they paid a high price at the hands of many of these other cultures, cultures, the Spanish especially, about, I've heard it said as high as 2/3 or more of the entire populations of some of these native tribes were decimated by the Spanish, bringing in not just disease and sickness and things like that, things that they didn't have an immunity to, but also when they were enslaved, when the manifest destiny
Well, in
that we talked
reality,
about.
this has actually occurred every time,
They've
every
come in
single
contact.
time that a people from Europe has come here, and it's happened more times than most realize.
Right.
You know, it happened in 100 BC. It happened in 700 AD.
Right.
It happened again when the Spanish came. It happened when the modern day European came. And so, yeah, there's a certain amount of respect and understanding that you need to think about when you're out doing some of these things to honor their wishes, so to speak.
When Pizarro,
I know I look like every other white boy out there, but you know, my heritage is also Native American Indian through the Lenape.
yeah.
And even though it's a small amount, it's something that I really cherish and hold on to. Yeah.
When Pizarro, I believe, was it Pizarro or Cortez, one of those, came to the Aztec, or was it the Incas? They bowed down and worshipped him, and he took advantage of that.
Well, it sounds like that was Cortez.
Cortez and the Aztec.
Yeah, he was a piece of shit, okay?
Yeah. Well,
You won't be able to use that.
and I may,
You better not.
but we know that when Cortez came, they bowed down and worshipped him because they had a tradition, sacred tradition, that a white man, white god, had visited them and was going to return.
Yeah, Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the white god.
And they thought that Cortez
Was the-
may be this returning god,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it didn't take long before they realized that these people can't be gods. And
Yeah.
you know, and if you want to get the most accurate version of these, go to the original record. Okay, I read 2 of these books before they were ever translated to English, and I can't read Spanish, but I did it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how bad I have to have original information. One of those books, fortunately, has now been translated into English, and if you want to read an incredible story, I'd highly recommend it. And that's Diego Duran's version of The Histories of the Indies of New Spain. Fascinating book. So, get original source material.
Okay, there's a good research talk.
Cortez really did suck.
Yeah.
I'm just giving you content.
Right. Well, that's great. You know. We just don't know what he sucked, but he eventually sucked on the end of a spear, I believe.
Well, there was a reason that the king was pissed off at Cortez, and not too many people know this, but Montezuma was actually a descendant of the royal families in the UK. Now, how could that be? Well, it's because it's not taught about the previous culture that came here prior to the Spaniards. It's the reason the Spaniards were coming here. They were trying to find the things that the previous culture had documented.
And some of the technologies that they found were technologies that were found in the old world, so to speak. Even though the American continent's obviously as old as the rest of the continents, it's just that some of the technologies transfers were the same.
I have no idea what the hell you just said.
I know, it's very deep topics. Basically, what I'm saying is they were surprised to find how highly advanced the cultures were when they got here.
Ah.
And
Yes.
they wondered, and they, like all other Europeans that came here, uh, believed that they were savages and they didn't understand how they, in some of these cultures, had the technology that they had.
Right. And each and every time they came here to not necessarily conquer them, but they wanted to force upon them
Religion, take their riches,
primarily their religion,
subjugate them to whatever they wanted.
You know, they each and every one of them had their own manifest destiny, if you will, and you know, felt that it was their God-given right to come and turn these savages into a civilized people,
Right.
when in fact they had been civilized many times prior. You know,
Right.
every culture goes through its rise and downfalls.
Right.
Are we getting way off track
Yeah,
again?
now we're going to get back on track. We're talking about today the underground city. And is there anything else that we need to cover here that may have influence on that or some bearing?
Yes, they were underground.
Okay.
Okay.
Which means they had to have had advanced technology, ventilation shafts, access to water, access to food.
Mm-hmm.
We talked earlier about that this particular underground city is adjacent to the Colorado River. We believe that at one time the Colorado River basin, the Colorado River floor, I guess not the basin, the floor was much higher in elevation, and that there has been some catastrophic flooding and things like that that lowered, that eroded quickly, rather than, as some science or historians would say, millions of years. It's more of a series of catastrophic floods. We have Lake Bonneville, Lake Kapala, some of these giant inland seas that at some point drained, whether by earthquake, volcano. We have a lot of evidence of volcanic activity down in that area.
Well, one of the interesting things is see, we kind of knew this years ago, that the way the Grand Canyon was carved out. I mean, you know, and I'm no geologist. I like to think I have common sense, but we knew a long time ago that it was carved due to sudden release of a large body of water.
Mm-hmm.
And we also knew that at one given point, the Grand Canyon was actually lowered 1,000 feet further. And so, you know, when I come across this story of Kincaid's Cave, it was of no surprise to me that he noticed that these stairs that come out of the front of this thing actually came down to a point where he commented the level of the river used to be.
Right.
I don't know why he said that. I don't.
Geological evidence.
I'm not
maybe,
sure what
fossils.
his field of expertise was, but by the comment made, he knew that that's where the river used to be.
Right.
And so, no surprise to me.
Let me interject
But
here.
it adds to the story, and it adds to the things that have been written about in the third book.
Let me add something here that adds a lot of credibility to what we're talking about. Back in, it would have been around 1996, a team of geologists and archaeologists contacted me through some of the things that I had been doing. I have a degree in anthropology. I've attended Southern Utah University, BYU, and Northern Arizona University studying these things. I had Sid and Marie Davis and some other individuals from California that contacted me, and they arranged an expedition. And what this expedition entailed was going on to one of the plateaus near the Colorado River to document that at one time there was a basic dam, rock or stone natural dam, between Navajo Mountain and the Kaparowitz Plateau. And so we took an expedition up onto the plateau. I guided them on this trip, and they looked at geographical, geological, and archaeological features on the plateau and compared them to other findings that they had on the Navajo mountainside and on the Navajo lands. And basically, we're working on the theory that that natural land bridge had washed away or had eroded away or caused from an earthquake or other geological activity, upthrusts or that they drained the Lake Bonneville suddenly and catastrophically eroded the Grand Canyon drainage in a short period of time.
Do you mean Kapala or another lake?
Or Kapala, what
Yeah,
they were
'cause-
calling it Lake Bonneville, but you know,
Really?
um,
Yeah, because just curious, because Bonneville never drained that way.
well, the giant inland sea that covered this area that
Right.
is referred to by some groups as Bonneville.
Right, and I hear you. We know that there was an ancient ocean that may very well have been attached to what has in the past been called Skull Seaway. For some reason, they don't call it that anymore. In fact, off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is called now. But when I was in my young years, it was called the Skull Seaway, and it's a sea that existed in Cretaceous times. That departed at some point due to whatever, catastrophic event, upheavals in the earth, what have you, but it left a lake behind. And that lake they called Lake Uinta.
Right.
Who knows, maybe some use Lake Uinta and Lake Bonneville synonymously.
Well,
I
what
don't
their
know.
theory was that at one time there was an inland sea that included Lake Bonneville and all
Okay.
these other lakes, and that geological activity caused this great ocean, inland ocean or sea, to rush out and go and create a large portion of the Grand Canyon, and left behind these other smaller lakes, even though they were giant inland seas as well. And one of these that was left is the Great Salt Lake. A lot of the salt and sediment was left from the Great Salt Lake. So this would have been a giant inland sea.
So this would have been after the last ice age.
Right, quote unquote. And then some of these other things have created the draining or evaporation of or whatever of these other inland seas. So we're talking about some theories here, but in their own minds, Sid Marie and I'm trying to think of the other gentleman's name who was one of the leaders of the geologists. I want to say Franklin, but I can see his face.
I would like you to show me that, by the way. Go into a little more detail
Um,
on Google Earth or something.
Yeah. Well, anyway, on this expedition, it lasted a week, and they were absolutely delighted, I guess, as it were, with what they found and with what they already knew, and they felt like in their mind that they had basically proven this theory, and that was part of their study. And these were individuals that believed in evolution, believed in a lot of theories and things that I don't necessarily subscribe to, but I agreed with their findings, and so it was pretty neat for me to see that. I'd always felt like that the Grand Canyon was a series of catastrophic events instead of a million-year evolutionary process.
Right.
Because we see how the forces and effect of water, if it would have, I mean, it has eroded back from the channel so far that I think you can almost prove that there was a giant flood through certain, because it's eroded so far back, whereas a channel would just erode like right straight down. You would have more of a narrow, thin canyon than this gigantic erode. Of course, you've got the side canyons and stuff coming in, but
Now, there was actually two events that occurred. The first one, although it was a sudden event, it dragged on for many, many years, continuously flowing.
right.
And that is what basically carved out the initial Grand Canyon. But there was another event that came, and this is where it took it down another 1,000 feet. And of course, it's a hypothesis, but
We also have evidence at certain times that volcanic activity, for instance lava falls, plugged portions of the Grand Canyon and backed the water up for a period of time. Maybe not as high of elevation as we're talking about, but significantly.
yeah,
So it is possible that these underground city inhabitants accessed their city from the shores of the Colorado by boat. a theory, but potentially they accessed the
In calmer times.
in calmer times,
Yeah.
as long as they didn't miss their landing.
All right.
But we've also talked about how we have found evidences that certain cultures actually had bridges across the Grand Canyon. We have the Anasazi Bridge that's documented, where the Anasazi Native Americans, whatever you want to call them, had crossed at a narrow spot on a rope.
To a portion or side of the river that
Doesn't look like there's any
well, it was so devoid of
trails.
Why would they be going over there? I mean, you know, so that they could walk 30 feet downstream and 50
Fish.
feet upstream
Maybe they're
and
fishing.
fish. I don't know. But from that point, where are you going to go?
Right.
What was over there? Why would they have to have a footbridge?
Yeah.
You couldn't escape. There's nowhere to go. To
Right.
me, that's a very odd place for a bridge.
Right.
There are other evidences that that also apply here that have to do with the J.W. Powell expedition.
That's where I was going next.
And it would really take some time to explain it. It's I'm trying to cover it as thoroughly as I can in the third book.
And that is
It has to do with the naming of a lot of these geographical features that exist down in the Angel Bright area.
right, and that's the forbidden histories of America.
Yeah, and there's just some strange circumstances that took place, and it just happens to tie in with the whole underground city thing.
Well, for one instance, we can mention from one of the diaries. I can't remember if it's a canyon voyage by Frederick Dallenbaugh or one of the other diaries. They talk about as they're going down through Marble Canyon that there's many caves and holes in the canyon wall, and they talk about some of them look like they're excavated with human hands. I'm trying to think. There's one cave that has been subsequently blocked off by the Park Service down in there, with an iron grate over it, and they say it's for protection of the bat colonies that live in the cave. And that's Stanton Cave.
Bullshit.
Yeah, that's Stanton
I'm
Cave.
sorry, I'm allergic to BS.
Right.
Yeah.
But they put forth a lot of effort to put an iron grate over this giant cave entrance to protect the bats. Where else in the world have they ever done a bat cave grate?
Who created government anyway?
Yeah. So,
I'm glad we have someone out there to look out for the bats, but we don't have anybody to look out for the homeless and the veterans of America.
right. Right.
God, I want to be a bat. I've never wanted to be a bat worse than I do right now.
Okay,
So I can
anything?
leave guano.
All right, we talked about the advanced civilizations. Are there any other evidences?
Once you get
Rainfall.
going in it, there's so many things that pops up, and you know, on a lot of it, it's certainly not set in iron,
Right.
which is the same thing I find with the current accepted theories and stories that have been told about America. They're just as what's the word I'm looking for? They're just as, help me out here, you're the scholar.
Just as awesome.
They're awesomest.
Let me say right here. That
Validity, that have the validity
authenticity.
of anything that we may be talking about. Why is it that the academic world would look at the things that we may believe based on the evidences that we found as preposterous? Hold on, I will find the word. Subjective. Why is what we're thinking and what we're focused on considered as ridiculous, subjective, preposterous, and yet what has come to be the norm and taught in our schools is
the most-
considered acceptable, and it's just as ridiculous of anything that,
I think it's far more ridiculous to believe that we came from an amoeba into a lizard into a salamander.
no, wait, I happen to believe that.
Crawled out of the ocean, turned into monkeys, and millions of years later, here we are.
It's really gonna suck when they find out that monkeys came from man.
You talking about your own genealogy or what?
I'm serious.
Okay. One thing I do want to say is that this spring and fall and during the summer months, we're going to be going on these trips to look for the underground city, to look for evidence of it, to look at some of their agricultural areas, to look for some of the evidences, the information posts left in the Native American rock art. And if you'd like to come on one of these trips and put up with this BS every day, sit around a campfire and hear some cowboy stories and some talk about the facts and the evidences and go to some of these sites, then we encourage you to give us a call, contact us, and get on the list.